The next one following this will be more interactive, so you'll get a chance to talk to each other about your ideas and thoughts. My name is Sandy Gahn. I work in the Office of Institutional Research at Iowa State University and have been working on the advanced grant that Iowa State had a few years ago and on the project here. But this session is really a session to link together theory and practice. And we're going to talk about some examples of how that's being done at two different universities. The overarching theme of this session is self-determination theory. This is a theory of human motivation which focuses on the degree to which individuals' behavior is self-motivated and self-determined. First, we'll have a discussion of the tools that we've used to examine self-determination theory. The coach survey is what we've been using. And in this case, there are lots of acronyms for coach. Lots of people use that. In this case, it refers to the Collaborative on Academic Careers in Higher Education, which is a survey that was developed at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and is now being used at more than 200 colleges and universities around the country. Kiernan Matthews is the director and principal investigator for the Coach Project at Harvard. He planned to be here, but he had a family emergency 2 days ago and flew to Reykjavik, Iceland, and went above and beyond and recorded his session from Iceland this morning. And we're hoping that technology will work to show you that presentation. And keeping in mind what we just learned about career life integration, he said there was a screaming child in the room next door. So we will keep our fingers crossed that this works. Our second presentation will be by Ian Handley from Montana State University. Ian will be talking about Montana State's advanced program and describing how they used self-determination theory and faculty surveys as the organizing concept for their advanced initiative and the things that they've learned about job satisfaction. Finally, the final presentation will be by my two colleagues, Lisa Larson and Mack Shelley from Iowa State University. And they're going to talk about how we use the coach survey as the tool to explore self-determination theory and what we've learned about the factors that impact overall job satisfaction, as well as an examination of intention to leave or stay. So let's see if technology will work here. So Kiernan's slides. Kiernan's slides will be available, and he's agreed to do the podcast that will be part of the website that we have for this conference. So if you missed all those references and are interested, you'll have an opportunity to see them. Next up, Ian Handley from Montana State.
The programs we've implemented at Montana State University that have been implemented, or we began these and implemented these thanks to an advanced institutional transformation grant awarded to my colleague Jessie Smith. Jessie Smith isn't here today, she's on sabbatical, but she helped me put together this presentation, a lot of these slides as well. She is the director of this grant. I'm this will work better. Thank you. Oh, this is nice. All right. A little freer. So she's the director of the grant. I'm a co-director of the grant along with Sarah Rushing, who also is not here today. So I want to really briefly present the idea of self-determination theory in the next slide. The idea being that all of the programs that we've instituted at Montana State as part of the advanced grant were guided by self-determination theory. So I'm just going to have a really brief overview of this. So the idea behind this is that we have these 3 psychological needs. And to the extent that these needs are supported, we feel motivated and pleased in a given domain. So if we're talking about being a faculty member, we feel satisfied with our job, we like our job, and we're motivated to continue doing our job and to excel and get creative and productive. It can also foster trust and loyalty when we're talking about the institution. So if you enjoy your job, you inherently enjoy where you're working for the most part. And it really does promote creativity, motivation, and performance. So everything you would really want, you want your faculty to be happy, you want them to be productive, and you want them to trust you. This is good. So these 3 psychological needs, the first is, well, they're really in no particular order. One of these is confidence. This is simply the belief that one has the ability to influence and master outcomes. So that people have the knowledge to really do what they want to set out to do. Next, we have relatedness. This is the experience of having satisfying and supportive social relationships and connections. And we've heard examples of that actually throughout the day. For example, at the writing workshop, that people, even if they're in different disciplines, they have the opportunity to talk to other people in other disciplines, foster friendships among people who have a very similar interest, nonetheless, in being productive writers. Autonomy is this last need. This is the experience of acting with a sense of choice and volition. You can think of this as, I have control over my life. So to the extent that we feel competent in a given domain, that we feel that we're related to our peers and perhaps the administration, and to the extent that we feel we have control over the trajectory of our careers, or that we have the ability to do the things we want to do and not the things we don't want to do, or at least, to some extent we can navigate that, we feel increased satisfaction. So Jessie created the NSF proposal for her project TRACS, and TRACS stands for Empirically Investigating Transformation Through Relatedness, Autonomy, and Competence Support. So again, the idea is that all the programs that we put together are trying to enhance or further satisfy at least one of those 3 needs, typically at least 2. The very general hypothesis, which I will elaborate on in a few minutes, is that to the extent that we can support women in STEM, with the beginning assumption, which we verify with data in just a minute, that they probably have their needs less satisfied relative to men in STEM, that they feel perhaps less autonomous, feel less related, a little more off in the periphery than men in STEM. So to the extent that we can support women in STEM, that should increase their job satisfaction. But really, in the kinds of programming we have, this can enhance the job satisfaction of faculty quite globally, which will overall lead to enhanced transformation of the culture at a given institution to be a place where faculty can really just thrive, broadly construed. So I'm homesick. So this is Montana State University. That's Bozeman, and there's psychology. I'm a psychologist. Sorry. So the way the project TRACS is partitioned out, there's a research capacity portion of the grant. There's enhancing work-life integration part of it, and also enhancing cultural attunement. So, helping people recognize implicit biases, helping them overcome implicit biases so that they are in control of their decisions, or better control and free from bias and so forth. So Under each of these three broad initiatives within the grant, we have all of these programs, and I'm certainly not afforded the opportunity to talk to you about all of these. I could really go on for literally 2 hours on this, but I want to highlight just a few things to give you a sense of how under each of these initiatives we're striving to really enhance the need satisfaction for women in STEM in particular, but not at the cost of everyone else, and in fact really to the benefit of everyone else as well. So enhancing research capacity and opportunity, we were able, through Advance, to hire a full-time or part-time, depending on which year we're looking at, person to help support people throughout the entire pre-award process of getting a grant. From I have this kind of idea, can you help me figure out where I might, what agency might be interested in funding this, to teaching people what are the requirements, here are some helpful hints. How do you put the application process together? We have, for the third year now, what we call a grant writing boot camp. It's a 6-week boot camp every Friday for 2 hours. About 20 faculty members and our grant writing coordinator get together, and they go through from the very beginnings of, looking through all of the calls for funding all the way through having a finished product at the end, or a near finished product at the end. And this is done in groups. We have groups of 20, so the idea here is this is enhancing people's relatedness. They are also, when applicable, hooked up with mentors, again, enhancing their relatedness. They have a feeling of autonomy from this, that they can choose to do this. They understand who to go to. They feel some control over this process, which, especially for a lot of beginning career people, is a bit mysterious. And competence, when they have the skill set, they know exactly what it is they need to do, when, who to contact, what are some good strategies, and so forth. So we're trying to enhance those needs in that particular domain. We have a work-life integration initiative. One of the programs we have that Beth spoke to a little while ago is a family advocate. And we have, whenever doing a faculty search, we try to get the search committee to set up just a 15-minute meeting for them to meet with our family advocate, who talks about our family-friendly policies, who talks about modified duty policies. We now have an opt-in for the tenure clock extension. So if you go to your chair and say, I'm pregnant, or my wife is sick and needs my care, it's an automatic tenure clock extension. You have to opt in if you want to stay on the regular time course for your tenure clock. So this is relieving a lot of the awkwardness of saying, can I please have a favor, when really it's not that. So she explains to people exactly what we have going on. And of course, she's a resource there for people, for the faculty who are already there. And again, she can put people in touch with other individuals. And the idea is that it's enhancing. Does this work? Yeah. It enhances those three needs. We also have a cultural attunement team. I'm part of that team. And we have a variety of programs that are designed to deal with various aspects of changing the entire culture of a university. Good luck, us. But we've made a lot of progress. One of the things I'd like to talk about really briefly is this search toolkit. So this was inspired heavily from Madison, Wisconsin's toolkit. So we borrowed from that, made it a little more MSU or Montana State specific. But what we do here is we walk people through step by step the search process to try to help them recruit as broad of an applicant pool as they possibly can. The philosophy being, the broader your applicant pool, the more stellar people you're going to get in that applicant pool, and the better candidates you're ultimately going to get. But we talk about how the language, just in putting out the advertisement, can turn off some applicants, particularly women applicants, from the way we're coming at it for this. We also talk about how unconscious biases can creep in when we're going through, when we're sifting through people's CVs, or when they come and deliver a talk, and we're like, oh, I don't really know if she'd like it here in Montana. This is a little too cowboy for her. Well, just let her decide, right? So these are ways that unconscious biases can creep in. And we have about a 20-minute webinar that we go to every search committee, and we train them on all of these issues. The idea being here that with the autonomy, we're giving them we're pointing out that everyone has these unconscious biases, and here's how you can notice them and overcome them so that you're free from bias, you have control over biases. Relatedness, we're always there to help them out. If they have any questions, that also can mean going to deans and provosts and advocating on their behalf. For extra funding, to bring out maybe another candidate and so forth. And their competence, we gave them a whole host of strategies for recruiting as broad and diverse applicant pool as they possibly can. So just some examples. Again, even with those examples, those are probably too short, but they give you a flavor of the idea here that we're trying to really enhance individuals' autonomy, relatedness, and competence really across a wide variety of domains. Am I way off on time? Oh, okay. So I will now talk more quickly. Our overall idea here, again, is that women are going to start off, particularly women in STEM, because this is an advanced IT grant, are going to start off at lower levels of need satisfaction, and hopefully throughout the time course of our grant, this is going to increase, and that they're going to start off with lower job satisfaction. I can show you that data in a moment. We also predicted that involvement with advance is going to increase job satisfaction, particularly for women in STEM, because advance our grant is really seeking out women in STEM and trying to enhance their experience. But really, we don't exclude people from participating in advance, and really we encourage everybody. We just give priority to women in STEM. So to the extent that people are involved with our various programs, they should have their psychological needs supported and thus have higher job satisfaction. And that's really getting to this third aspect. So not only is this helping women, this is really ultimately going to help everybody. And I will really, there's a lot here, so let me just, I can go through this really quickly. So since we received the grant in 2012, every late October, November, we send out a broad faculty survey. Not too dissimilar from what we just heard, except a little different. We're asking some different questions. For the purposes of this talk, I'll just focus on a few. We ask a lot of stuff, though, like trust in the administrator, how supported do you feel by your dean, by your chair, and so forth. But for the purposes of this talk, again, we are really interested in basic need satisfaction. So we have scales that have already been created by DC and Ryan, who were the people who really came up with self-determination theory, and also job satisfaction. So we asked them at the very beginning of the grant, before we had a chance to do anything, what is their need satisfaction, what's their job satisfaction. We measured these things again in 2013, so the next year. I'm going to really focus on that need satisfaction here, but we also had the opportunity, because Advance had been around for a year, to ask people the extent to which they were involved in the various aspects of Advance. So there's three broad initiatives. How much contact have they had with Advance? And at the very end, not the very end, last fall, we were able to ask their job satisfaction and a variety of other measures that are really important for institutions to consider, like your intention to stay for the next 5 years, to what extent you feel you belong at Montana State University, and so forth. So what did we find? First of all, really, we could have circled both of these. One nice thing, though, is I think this isn't a nice thing. This is the thing we're trying to overcome. But there is a difference here. So women we had a lot of power behind this. It's not a huge difference, but women were less satisfied in STEM relative to men and felt lower need satisfaction. So these were this is what we expected, and this is exactly what we're trying to fix. That goes away. This is the good part, sorry. Men, they don't change. So when we look at them 2 years later from baseline, they are no more job satisfied, but that's not that good. They're not less job satisfied. So going out there and really finding ways to help women in STEM, really just totally came out wrong. Really finding ways to help women in STEM does not come at a cost to men in STEM. They are just as happy. But women in STEM are happier. This is statistically significant. And of course, we're hoping this is just going to keep climbing over the next years. This is a little busy. Let me just walk you through it. We can just ignore that on the left. Bunch of stats here. What we did find is, for one of the hypotheses, and this is just of course, this should happen, women in STEM were more involved with the advanced initiatives than everyone else in the community, but that was the point. We were reaching out to them. We were trying to actively recruit them, but other people could have contact with advanced, and we certainly opened up our doors to people whenever we could. So that's a significant path there, or that happened, that they were more involved with advance overall. Ignore that for a second. The more people, faculty members, were involved with advance in 2013, so in that 1 year, 2012 to 2013, the more they were involved with advance, we see greater positive changes in their need satisfaction on that autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So this is happening, and there's no gender differences. This is happening for men and women. So really reaching out to women in STEM and instituting these programs to help encourage their research and their belonging at the university helped everybody with regards to the psychological needs. And furthermore, when we look at that change between year one and year two, we see a positive change in job satisfaction from the very beginning of the grant to the last time we recorded data, which was last fall. We're getting ready to do another data blitz very soon. 0 minutes left. So the bottom line is really that's that stuff that it works. So I mean, really going out there and trying to enhance need satisfaction in these ways helps. So, yeah, this was another thing I was going to include if I have time, which I don't. But dang it, this is what I wanted to show. I should leave you with these last two slides. These are the people. This is the NSF disclaimer. All this research was supported by an advanced IT grant. We have, there it is, okay. We have a bunch of resources. We have the faculty search toolkit. We have the family advocate, what we're doing there. We have a lot of the policies that are either in the pipeline or already established in there. There's a lot of resources here that you might find useful in really breaking up that really busy slide I had with a whole bunch of programs. There's actually descriptions of that, and in often cases, materials that you could use or modify. Now I'm negative 3 minutes probably. Thanks.
Well, I applaud you guys for hanging with us for the last presentation before we get to do the fun stuff. Mack and I felt like we had, the worst spot. So we're hoping you go get some coffee, get a buzz before you put up with us. So we'll try to make this as painless as possible. Thank you very much for coming to our workshop. And Sandy and Mack and I are very excited about showing you these results. So let's get started. We're first going to present the results of an overview of self-determination theory, which Ian has done a nice job of introducing. We're also then going to talk about the sample and introduce the constructs, or to the scientists out there, I'd call them variables maybe, and outcome measures for analysis we did, which was called structural equation modeling. We'll show you those results, which Mack is going to take over. And then I'm going to come back and introduce the measures that we used for a second kind of analysis called logistic regression, and we'll walk you through those results as well with Mack wrapping up. So that's where we're headed. As Ian already told you, self-determination theory is the foundation for our research. And our study proposed to better understand what drives faculty to drive and persist in STEM careers. Self-determination theory can really be used to understand how the environment can support STEM faculty. According to this theory, people who perceive that they have autonomy are competent and experience a sense of belonging or relatedness will be self-motivated to engage in their careers, to be creative and innovative and productive, and to experience high job satisfaction. The environmental supports are conceptualized as impacting their job satisfaction directly, but also indirectly by providing the support necessary for faculty to experience autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So this next picture is kind of a visual presentation of our model. And we'll be talking about this as we go through this presentation. The model of self-determination theory is particularly timely for understanding STEM faculty satisfaction in an environment of increased competition and scarcer resources. STEM faculty members' sense of volitional autonomy or their ability to freely choose the key components of their job, research topics, classes taught, the type of university service. It's vulnerable as they try to compete for grant funding and help students learn amidst increasing student enrollment and needs. Various expectations affect volitional autonomy as well in how faculty fulfill their job responsibilities. Their perceived competence is challenged as they are asked to generate more research grants and scholarship, teach more classes with more students, and provide more institutional service, often with the same or fewer resources available to them. Perceived competence is also challenged as faculty members find their classrooms more diverse, with little multicultural training in how to amend the teaching strategy so everyone is successful. Faculty's sense of belonging or relatedness relies on frequent positive interaction with at least a few people invested in their welfare over time. This sense of belonging may relate to what faculty label as collegiality or the sense of fit in their department. Faculty do receive various types of support from the institution, but institutional support often is not viewed as consistent with the objective of increasing faculty autonomy, perceived competence, and volitional autonomy. For example, women STEM faculty members may be particularly excited by university resources that help her translate the impact of her research grant into greater benefits by using broader impacts in the larger world. These resources may help her reach across disciplines, thereby increasing her networks and also her sense of belonging. So let's talk a little bit about our sample. Remember, we are a coach institution as well. That was our sample size of 558 faculty. I want to tell you some other data besides what you can read. Our data set excluded our non-tenure faculty just for the purposes of this analysis. So we are just looking at the tenure track faculty. It covered 62 departments. 58% of the sample was STEM. Another 18% were coming from social and behavioral sciences, but all our colleges across Iowa State were represented. We have about 83% of the sample was either married or in a civil union at the time. We had about 20% were holding administrative titles. 16% had infants or preschool-age children. Another 34% had elementary or middle school kids. And interestingly enough, we also had about 7% of the sample that had either college students that they were supporting in college or disabled folks that they were dealing with in the family, or we had 4% with elder care. And it's kind of representing what we've already been talking about at this conference with work-life balance. For our GLBT faculty, 2.5% identified as GLBT, but we had another 4.8% that declined to answer that question, and probably that has to do with some of the politics involved in identifying as GLBT. The annual salary for this sample was pretty broad. We had about 28% above $120,000, and that's partly, you can see we have a lot of fulls professors in this sample, but the range went all the way down. We had about 5% making $45,000 to $60,000, and then there was pretty good split above all the brackets in between $45,000 and $120,000. So pretty good distribution of salary across that sample. So as you have seen from Kiernan, we did use the coach, and as Kiernan showed you, there are what they have sort of categories of respondents across those items, and he showed you, I don't know if he has 20 of them maybe labeled on the coach survey. It's important to understand in our analysis, we did not use those variables. Instead, we generated our own concepts or constructs or variables, depending on what you're going to call them with discipline. So that's important that you understand that we are deriving them just simply from coach items. So some of our constructs might sound similar to what Kieran was talking about. They are not, they're not the same. And second, the constructs that we developed were based on steps. The three of us are social scientists. We know a lot about measurement and teach our students a lot about developing scales. So we use that strategy in the development of these scales. First, I, as the person embedded in the self-determination theory, I looked first for theoretically consistent items that fit within self-determination theory. Then once I had identified those items, we began doing some empirical analysis to see, let's say that I might identify 10 items that fit within a construct of, let's say, autonomy. Then we looked to see if those 10 items held together, meaning that people responded to them in the same way, and also we did some factor analysis on those items and began to refine that construct to where we ended up with items that hung together well and that were consistently loading on the same factor. And that's how we developed our scales. And from that, we came up with a number of what I'm now calling a construct, but in essence, they are scales from the coach that we created. So let's walk you through the various pieces of that. The first one were what we are calling environmental supports that have to do with both directly increasing faculty satisfaction as well as indirectly increasing faculty satisfaction by increasing these three needs, competence, relatedness, and autonomy. So there are 11 identified from the coach survey that we found. You'll see on your handouts, at the very back of the handouts you haven't yet seen, we have the three models that you can see in a dizzying array with arrows going in every direction. We wanted you to know that we can do complicated analysis. So even if you don't understand them, trust us, we understand it. So that's what we cared about. But as you'll see, not all 11 of them on that far left that you're looking at are included necessarily, because what you're looking at are only the significant relationships. So of the 11, there might not be all 11 of them that turned out to be significant. So an example for one of those constructs of an environmental support is called research support, and there you see an example item from the coach, the availability of course release time to focus on your research, and then they rated how satisfied they were that they had course release time to be able to do that. Here's some other examples of environmental support that are particularly relevant for us today. Work-life balance support, we've talked a lot about that. That would be defined for us as factors that enable the faculty to maintain a satisfactory balance between job responsibilities and personal and family obligations. Another example, research support, factors at multiple levels of the organization that provide faculty with time, space, financial, and person power resources needed to complete research consistent with their personal standards and the institutional expectations. And finally, dean support, both the communication and the consistency of priorities, the timely decision-making, acting in a means that faculty perceive as genuine concern with their success and well-being. So that's just 3 of the 11 constructs. Okay, again, Ian identified these 3 needs for you, but I'll make them a little bit more specific in our case.
The first one, perceived autonomy. And when I say perceived, what I mean is they're rating their autonomy. So I mean self-perceived. With social scientists, we sometimes get obnoxiously picky about the words that we use. That's why you love us, I guess. The definition for autonomy for us is an individual's ability to freely choose the key components of his or her job and allocate his or her time accordingly. Another, for perceived competence, it's an individual's perceived ability to complete the tasks he or she is assigned successfully and efficiently. And for us, in the data set, remember, we are stuck with the data from the coach survey. We didn't get to ask any that we would have generated ourselves. And so perceived competence became defined in the coach survey as the time devoted to the different areas of competence. So we made the judgment that if somebody felt like they were spending an adequate amount of time in research and in teaching and in service, that they were perceiving themselves as competent in that area. And if they felt like they didn't have enough time, then we were making a judgment that that could be interpreted as being perceived as less competent. And for the last one, perceived relatedness, that is defined again as a sense of belonging, and to also, let's see here, the extent to which they feel that they are a valued member of a vital group with mutual goals and interests, and as I've mentioned before, in our language it might relate to what we would call collegiality or a sense of fit. So here's an example item for relatedness, how well you fit in your department or your sense of fit. And that's just some examples. For autonomy, it could be the discretion you have to choose the committees on which you serve. And for competence, I think I already told you, the proportion of time you spend on the following, and again, the extent to which you feel like you're spending enough time on that. These are our two outcomes for the first round with our structural equation modeling analysis. The first one is teaching and service satisfaction, and for that, we had example would be specific aspects of one's position, including the committee participation, the number of level of courses taught, the quality of students, and there were 5 items on that. And then global satisfaction and overall satisfaction with being a faculty member at ISU, and questions about if they'd make the same choice again to come to ISU, Iowa State as a place to work, and whether you'd recommend a candidate at your rank to come to ISU. So there were 6 items on that. Okay, and I think I'm going to turn it over to Mack, who's right behind me.
Lisa, thank you very much. So you can follow along, by the way, as Lisa mentioned, with these handouts. They have the details, and you see on the screen pretty much the same thing, but we also have a way to visualize this that I think will be helpful to cut through some of the complexity. The main thing to understand is what you're about to see is kind of a tour through 3 different sets of results, each of which has one of these perceived needs as a mediator variable. In other words, we're predicting these 3 need outcomes and using those outcomes in turn to predict the kind of all the things of interest, or teaching service satisfaction and global satisfaction. So what we're going to see is essentially a filtering process going on, which enhances the actual impact of some of these predictors. So that's a slightly colorized version of what you would have in your handout. The colors are meant to indicate where an arrow points. So if you kind of walk back from where the arrowheads are, that's what's being predicted, and walk that particular line back to where it originates, and that's a predictor that happens to be a significant predictor in each of those cases. One really quick takeaway from that diagram is that we're doing a reasonably good job predicting things here. So we predict, there's a thing that says R squared equals 0.75. We actually explain about 75% of the variation across the respondents in our sample in terms of their level of perceived autonomy. That's really pretty accurate. So we feel very good that these are highly credible results. We're also doing a pretty good job explaining global satisfaction and teaching service satisfaction. Not quite to the same extent, but pretty close. So that's a good thing for starters. So to try to make sense out of what otherwise would be looking at a bit of a spider web kind of array, this is meant to help give a visual read of what you saw otherwise. So this is in like descending order of the most important predictors of perceived autonomy, for starters. And as a chair, I'm happy to say that chair support happened to be the single strongest predictor. Now, deans will be happy to know that dean support was the next strongest predictor. These are both above 0. That means that the happier faculty were with the support they got from their chair, the happier that they were with support they got from the dean, the more likely they were to feel a higher level of perceived autonomy. Okay? And it kind of trails off from there. Some things that you might have thought would be significant, I don't know, like STEM status versus non-STEM or gender, they don't show up there as significant predictors. And that's one of the intriguing things about these results. Okay, now from a chair's perspective, I've got to take a deep breath and explain this one to you. So this is within that same model, predictors of teaching service satisfaction, with perceived autonomy as the single strongest predictor of teaching service satisfaction outcomes. Next strongest is research support, then it really drops off, and then you have this negative result involving chairs. Okay, and I've been trying to process this. One of the first lessons I think I internalized was that whatever happens in a department, it's always a chair's fault. And so I think that's more or less what we're seeing here. So even to the extent that chairs might be trying to be helpful about stuff, it's not often perceived that way, and that's the best I can do to try to explain that on the basis of the data we have here. Now, you do notice that STEM, non-STEM status does make a difference here. It's positive, not real strong. And so that means that STEM faculty are more likely to be satisfied with teaching service, a component of their jobs, compared to non-STEM faculty. And then the other outcome of interest is global satisfaction. And here it turns out that the key item is recognition support. That's the single strongest predictor. And then it kind of trails off. You've got faculty teaching quality out here, and so everything in between. So those are the significant predictors there. But wait, that's not all, because if you look at the diagram, you'll notice that there are areas that go into perceived autonomy, then go out again toward these two satisfaction metrics, right? And that means that there are indirect effects in addition to the direct effects that we were just looking at in those bar charts. So just take a little bit of time to summarize, but the key thing to note is that these are all additionally significant effects on the model where the mediating effect of perceived autonomy leads to further enhancements of outcomes of satisfaction. So the satisfaction is higher when perceived autonomy is positively mediating faculty teaching quality, for example. Dean support gets an additional boost here through this indirect effect. Chair support gets a little bit of a boost as well. That's what that implies. And dean support is very strongly significant, by the way, in terms of the extent to which that's mediated. Its effect is enhanced through this mediating effect of perceived autonomy. Okay, so doing the same sort of thing with perceived competence time spent, here's what that diagram looks like. Now, we're not predicting that outcome, perceived competence time spent, terribly well with these particular metrics. R squared there is fairly modest, but it's not bad. The overall model is significant. We're doing better predicting the satisfaction outcomes, which is kind of more important anyway. So again with the bar graphs, and again a negative chair effect, you'll notice. So there's something going on here about chair effects. It seems to be a little bit different from what's happening otherwise. For this particular situation, work-life balance kind of wins out. Evaluation support and a few other things are important. And in terms of demographics, STEM, non-STEM matters. So STEM faculty tend to feel higher levels of satisfaction with their perceived competence, time spent. The teaching service satisfaction outcome here is mainly predicted by perceived competence, time spent. Now, here is one area in which gender does play a role. We found in general that gender didn't make a huge difference, but here's one case in which it does. And then predictors of global satisfaction within this context. Perceived competence support is the single strongest predictor, and there are a bunch of others out here as well. And again, indirect effects that particularly enhance the effect of the STEM, non-STEM distinctions. That's heightened by this mediating effect, as is share support. Same sort of thing quickly for relatedness. This set of outcomes is really pretty decent. We're predicting half or more of the variation kind of across the board. That's pretty good. Bar chart kind of summary basically says that the key predictor of relatedness is faculty teaching quality. Chair support, thankfully, is positive here. So there we're doing something right. Recognition support's important. Dean support is significant and positive as well. Within this third model context, predictors of teaching service satisfaction, it's mainly research support by kind of a large margin. Gender matters here, and so does STEM. And global satisfaction outcome, relatedness is the single strongest predictor there, and you can see a number of other variables or constructs that are significant there. And there's some indirect effects here, too, that heighten the role of faculty teaching quality, evaluation support, recognition support. Work-life balance gets heightened here as a predictor of satisfaction, as is chair support and having good benefits.
So we just have a couple slides on this last part as a different outcome variable. So Kieran mentioned this as well. I just wanted to show you this slide of self-determination theory also being related to the extent to which people intend to stay or they intend to leave their institutions. So from a self-determination theory, workplaces, and Ian also mentioned this in his slide too, workplaces that meet these needs are regarded as intrinsically motivated. So relatedness is conceptually related to the notion of belonging, which we've already talked about. And that means that individuals thrive when they have frequent interactions with others with whom there is a sense of mutual caring and concern. Deficits in these needs are associated with higher levels of burnout, which of course significantly increases faculty's intention to leave. And research has especially shown that a lack of perceived belonging, which is the poor fit with the organization, or perceived lack of social support, is associated with increased intention to leave. And then finally, individuals are going to seek out and remain in environments in which their basic needs are met. And this research is coming from Ryan and DC 2000, and also Baumeister and Leary, a 1995 reference. So, and there's lots of other research doing that. Those are the two that are most cited in this self-determination theory. So this is the same model I showed you earlier, although the only thing that's different is you notice that the two outcome variables are no longer global satisfaction and teaching service satisfaction, but they're the other two outcomes, intent to stay and intent to leave. So folks, of course, were really interested in those two variables in particular for us. So I just want to tell you what those are in this coach data set. And again, Kieran mentioned it already in his data set, but literally in the coach sample, respondents indicated whether they intended to remain at the institution, and then they checked one of these options, either no more than 5 years, more than 5 years but less than 10, or 10 years or more. So that's what all the respondents, we have that data on. And then intent to leave, respondents are considered having intention to leave if they did one of these things or more. So they could have checked all of them or could have just checked one of them, but we would have viewed them as intending to leave. They sought an outside job offer, they received a formal job offer, or they renegotiated the terms of their employment. So that would be separated for us into two categories, either a group that had done none of those things or a group who had done at least one of those things. And from there, I'll turn it back to Mack, and he'll tell you the results of that.
Lisa, thank you again. I'll give you a quick set of findings here and kind of cut to the chase a bit. Okay, so there were 3 outcome categories to a question in Coach about how long do you plan to remain at this institution, and here's kind of a Cliff Notes version of what the results show. So the kind of umbrella finding is that for all 3 outcome categories, that's how number of years you plan to stay, basically. What we call the variable area, but it's really whether one is in STEM or non-STEM as a discipline. And also faculty rank, assistant, associate, full, are significant predictors. Kind of specifically, full professors are less likely than assistant or associate professors to say they're going to be here longer. STEM faculty were more likely than non-STEM faculty to say that they are going to be here a longer time. So that STEM people arguably feel more deeply embedded in the institution, more likely to hang around, happier with their lot in life. Full professors are more likely to know how long they are staying at ISU compared to the other ranks, would be the other major finding there. There's a second set of outcomes. Basically, it's whether you'd ever actively sought an outside job offer, as Lisa was describing, received a formal job offer, or renegotiated terms of your employment. And, whoops, sorry, that's our disclaimer, but the kind of quick version of those outcomes is that both rank, assistant, associate, full, and STEM, non-STEM disciplinary area are significant predictors of intent to stay. So specifically, assistant professors are less likely to take actions to leave than are full professors. So assistants were more likely to respond yes to one or more of these 3 things. If you said no to all 3, then the implication is you're going to hang around. STEM faculty were less likely to take actions, those 3 actions, to leave compared to non-STEM faculty. Perceived competence time spent also, by the way, turned out to be positively related to intent to stay. So in terms of like an actionable outcome, so enhancing faculty sense of perceived competence seems to have a really positive outcome for keeping them around. Also, full professors are more likely to have renegotiated their terms of employment compared to assistants or associates. And I'll let it go at that and see if you have questions or comments.
Yeah, we're going to open the floor to any questions that you have for either of our presentations here. We should make note that the research that Lisa, Mack, and I have been working on is about Iowa State. We're hoping to get some data from Coach to see if this model holds for other institutions as well. So we're looking forward to using some of that data that Kiernan was talking about having access to. Questions?
Sorry, I was standing in the back. Just a couple of questions. Did you control for salary when you did the analysis?
Well, the short answer is no. I mean, very indirectly, you're doing that by taking a rank into account, but actual dollars of salary, no.
Right, because some departments generally pay a lot higher than others.
They sure do, yes.
I don't know if that's a factor, but I would think that might be.
Yeah, I think your point is well taken, and I think the STEM, non-STEM distinction, and Don has talked about this a lot as well from the coach survey is I know the humanities faculty from the general coach results were unhappy with their salaries, and there actually was a boost in LAS to increase those humanity faculty salaries, and part of that came out of the coach results. So that could be one thing that you're seeing with those STEM, non-STEM is also reflection of the salary.
And the other thing is we weren't able, the data that we get from coach is anonymous, so we're not able to tie responses to an actual salary. There's a question there about how satisfied they are with their salary, but we don't have an actual salary in the just ranges, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'm kind of intrigued by the apparent negative effect of the chair support with respect to the teaching and I think service issues. But is it possible that some of the questions that were used to load onto that are the chair's duties in assigning teaching? I'm just wondering if that was possibly conflated with support, because at most institutions, chairs are directly associated with assigning teaching as opposed to assigning research and assigning campus-wide service.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Yeah, I'm sort of painfully aware from having gone through this for a while now that it's almost impossible to make a teaching schedule work out for everybody's satisfaction. So it's very easy to get people hacked off, even if you're trying to do the best you can to, particularly now to maximize enrollments, which is what drives the revenue at the institutions. I'm sorry, teaching evaluations, of course, yes. That evaluation process is all done, well, by chairs. And yeah, I've invested a lot of time this last cycle, by the way, going through quite a bit of detail in every faculty member's teaching evaluation, put a little grid together to indicate where they were compared to the aggregate. My particular department, by the way, has a nice situation, which we have very high mean scores. But then the problem is when I write up the annual evaluation, it's almost like damning with faint praise. I say your scores were great, but they're a nudge below the sort of spectacular overall average. And so that's probably not processed very favorably, I would think. But it's a true statement, though.
So was the distinction between STEM and non-STEM self-identified, or was it a specific set of disciplines that were in the STEM realm or not in the STEM realm? And the reason I'm asking is because at our university, we have a lot of folks that are in the applied sciences, agricultural sciences, forestry, and these places. They don't self-identify as STEM, but I certainly, as a STEM researcher, would put them in that category.
Right. We did have the department that they were in, and so we identified them as STEM, non-STEM, and in that example, we would have included those agricultural faculty in the STEM groups. So,
thanks. Any other questions? Last one.
The question around the full professors being, more exact in the time, I'm wondering if was there any a relationship to retirement on that? If they'd say, well, I guess I wasn't sure how you were focusing that question. It's like, are you going to be here over 10 years? No, right? Not because I'm, leaving for another position, but because retirement would be within that period. Did you have any control on that?
Well, short answer again is no on that, but that's an excellent point. And, obviously if someone's already been around an institution, say 35 or 40 years, your future time horizon's sort of foreshortened. And so you're much less likely to say, yeah, I'll be around 10 or more years if you've already been here a long time. So yes, that's a valid point. So there are kind of floor and ceiling effects, in other words, we didn't quite take into account. I suppose we could use number of years in rank would be one option, or number of years at the institution. But of course, people come in with time at other institutions quite often, so how much of that is just how much wear and tear you have on you as a faculty member from wherever, or if it's how many years at this particular institution.
Yeah, we do know that 2/3 of the sample have not held a position at another institution, which is kind of, I don't know, I guess that kind of surprised me, but with so many full profs in the sample, I would think that would have been lower.
So there, Mack and, well, Lisa and Sandy, the question on teaching service satisfaction, it was highly correlated with research support. That was the first
Okay.
item.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that? What that might mean if you broke that down?
Well, I'm going to have to give an off the top of my head kind of response. I don't know the answer for sure. I mean, clearly there are differential time demands, right? And so I think what we're picking up in that relationship is the fact that it's very helpful to be successful across the board, right, to achieve promotion and tenure. So I think what we're running into is the fact that faculty are thinking about how they can I guess, use time synergistically, to be most efficient in time use. We only have 24 hours a day for everybody, right? And so kind of a matter of how much action you can pack into that time, however many of those hours you're awake and working, when part of that time is devoted to other stuff, work-life balance issues in particular. So that's not a direct answer, but...
So please join me in thanking all of our speakers. There's no break now, unfortunately for you, but Nancy Franz is going to come up and talk about the next portion of our